appreciate that point there. Stay with us. Let's also take a listen in to the kind of support, if at all, that India has garnered on this tough stance that India has taken. We have for you some reactions coming in from world leaders.
We should show the international community an example of an innovative, constructive equality, respect for national sovereignty, norms of international law, and the unshakable principles of the United Nations. However, in order to realize this agenda, only desire and will are not enough. Real instruments of such interaction are required, and they can only be created within the framework of integration.
As we leave the European Union, we want to maintain a close and open trading partnership with our European neighbours, and at the same time pursue our ambition to secure free trade agreements around the world with new partners and old allies alike. The scale of infrastructure investment required cannot be met by public financing alone. And the UK, I believe, can be a natural partner in delivering this infrastructure by supporting the finance, the design, and the delivery needed to make the vision a reality.
Mr. Ranade, I want you to also come in on the earlier aspect that we were discussing. I also wanted to respond on that. But how, according to you, are the Asian countries really looking at the aspect of sovereignty and responding to India's stance here?
Well, firstly, the Southeast Asian countries are economically dependent on China.
Yes.
And as the Chinese themselves say, they look to the United States for security and look to China for economic benefit. China wants to change that. But they're looking at us to see how far we will go to accommodate Chinese interests. India, as far as it's concerned, is very clear that we share a border with China. We have civilizational links with China. And there are many other areas where we can cooperate or agree to differ. But whatever India does, it will be a bilateral arrangement. So I think this has been impressed on the Chinese, that their perception that we are too close to the United States and our objective is to encircle China is unfounded. We are not that close to the United States. We have no alliance agreement. Secondly, if I may just say, the China-Pakistan economic corridor has a definite military aspect to it. And that is what causes us a lot of concern. It's something tangible. There are secure fiber optic cables being built or being laid between Kashgar, which is the headquarters of the South Xinjiang military district, and the GHQ in Rawalpindi. The railway in Pakistan is being linked to the South Xinjiang railway. Gwadar is being developed as a naval base. These are tangible things that worry us, and they need to be clarified, particularly in the light of reports that China is now going to base about 10,000 Marines in Gwadar. So when we look at all this, naturally India sees the One Belt, One Road as a vehicle which is not really an economic vehicle. It's meant to extend China's economic, military and diplomatic influence all the way across its borders right through to Europe. So for us, there are a whole lot of factors that require to be clarified, particularly as we notice that the strategic space is being squeezed, and that will be not only for us, even the other countries will feel it. They're already finding it in the context of the South China Sea, and frankly, they don't know how to respond.
Right. Mr. Jacob, I can quickly come to you on this. Is China seemingly taking India's tough stance in its stride? And that seems to be the case, at least from what the Chinese Premier has said.
Oh, I don't think the Chinese are ignoring entirely India's concerns. I think over time, over the last couple of years, in fact, the Chinese have increasingly come around to the view that India is a crucial link, is a crucial player in the One Belt, One Road. It has to be. Else, most of these projects will just fall apart. So I think if you look at what Chinese scholars have been saying, if you just cut out the rhetoric and the sort of threatening noises, I think they have increasingly come around to the view that India needs to be taken on board. The Chinese need to modify their position in order to accommodate Indian interests. I mean, if you look at what the Chinese ambassador recently said, he went so far as to say that the China-Pakistan economic corridor could be renamed in order to accommodate India's concerns. It's another matter that that line was actually removed from the official version finally put out. But I think that's a sign that the Chinese are very, very conscious that this project cannot take off without India's support.
Mr. Tanian, if I can quickly come to you on this stance that India has taken, does it stand to gain more or lose more from it? Because it is ultimately a very a tough road ahead, if I may, for India to actually strike that balance.
I would agree. It's a question. But I think fundamentally, India is going to have to come around to terms with, does it want to be part of an effort that builds walls or bridges? And in this particular case, I think the reality is stark. On China's side, there are 100 countries who expressed interest, 40 who have signed on. India should consider very carefully how it wants to deal with this. Economically, it does not want to be left out, nor can it afford to be. So hopefully, calmer heads will prevail and dialogues about what the real issues are can be addressed. Obviously, India has concerns about territorial disputes between it and Pakistan. But will these disputes, in essence, be a roadblock for the rest of the world to try to engage in free and fair trade?
But Mr. Ranade, in your view, are those concerns going to be looked into by China, and would a dialogue be successful here, as we've been discussing?
Well, the 2-3 quick points I'd like to make here, particularly with reference to what was just said, and what in essence he said was, if there is a dispute, why can't we set it aside and move ahead till a resolution is found? And I think if that is what we've done with the Chinese. We have problems with them, we set them aside, and we are moving ahead. Secondly, as far as what you said is what do we stand to lose? Firstly, I think it's far too early to estimate what exactly the One Belt, One Road will achieve.
Okay.
Let us see how far it goes, how quickly it develops. It's going to go through some very troubled terrain. Central Asia is one, Pakistan is the other, Turkey is the third. Whether these actually materialize or not, we'll have to see. How many countries really stick on to the One Belt, One Road? Sri Lanka is already having serious problems. Pakistan is beginning to have problems. So these countries, which are the initial recipients of the so-called benefit of One Belt, One Road, will actually be examples for the other countries who will see whether it is worth or not getting on board the One Belt, One Road. But I do feel that China has been trying to push us by particularly the manner in which it did the China-Pakistan economic corridor. It ignored our interests, knowing full well that we are going to be sensitive on it. And even now, there is no, if I may say, there's no willingness indicated by China to try and find some kind of middle ground. But I do feel that China will realize in time. Their analysts, their military strategists have pointed out to them that without India's cooperation, the One Belt, One Road will be very, very difficult to pull off. So I think that might get China to start talking to us.
Mr. Tanian, just to take a step back and look at this project overall, according to you, does this provide, as many have been saying, skewed benefits to a particular region?
Are you addressing me?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, this is something that is being generated by China and therefore is going to be the benefit. But as you can see today and in past, she has been stressing that this will be something that benefits all who participate. This is not a me first type of initiative. It is about how these countries can create connectivity through infrastructure and then use that as a basis for free trade. I don't think that anybody would say that that is a bad thing. In terms of how China and India deal with each other, it is a two-way street. Yes, India has concerns, but what is India proposing? If India does not like the Belt and Road Initiative, what is India's answer to it? If there's a legitimate way of saying how India would propose to solve this, I think the world would be happy to listen.
Mr. Jacob, how is India's stance also being perceived in China? Is it more a message on POK? Is it more a message on territorial integrity? How is it being perceived?
I think it's all of that. The Chinese response on this depends on which Chinese you're talking to. I mean, India scholars in China
Yes.
understand India's concerns very clearly. They know that this is a issue that impinges on India's core interest. But there are other scholars also who think that this is a matter of where India is, playing for pride. That because India considers itself equal to China, therefore India cannot stand it. I think that is an unfair characterization. That is an overstatement, if at all. And I think what needs to be understood is, I think what many scholars and policymakers in China are coming around to the fact is that India will play a crucial role in the One Belt, One Road, whether it participates directly or not. I think, leaving aside what has gone past and without looking too far ahead into the future, I think one thing India and Indian policymakers, Indian scholars can do is something that the Chinese will be paying very, very close attention to. They know that India can do it and that India will do it.
Mr. Ranade, I know you've been urging to come in, but quickly, before we come to that aspect, also about how exactly, according to you, does India stand affect its neighbours when it comes to the tough stance that it's taken?
Well, the first thing is we are aware now that our neighbors have got onto One Belt, One Road.
Yes.
We are also aware that they need it. They need the financial assistance that they will get from China for developing their own infrastructure. And let me remind you that soon after this government came in, our Prime Minister, in fact, reached out repeatedly, I would say, to the Chinese, requesting their cooperation and their participation in various infrastructure projects in India, because we are aware that our needs are very great and we don't really have the resources within India to materialize
Does
them.
India stand isolated at this point? Because there's been very little support, of course, coming
No, I don't think it's a question of isolation just yet.
Right.
As and when the One Belt, One Road really starts materializing on the ground, that is when we will start feeling an isolation if by that time things have not worked out. And I don't think we are at that stage yet, or in fact anywhere near that stage yet.
Mr. Tanya, in closing remarks from you, would you agree with the point that's been made right now? And also, what according to you lies on the road ahead for India to ensure that it at least garners some support?
Well, I think India has to come forward not with having this idea that everyone understands their position, and just make it very clear where there should be a white paper that discusses exactly what India's strategic and economic goals and engagement with China should be. I do think there is a risk of isolation. You're already beginning to see that, but I also agree there's a long road ahead as China has to confront different governments, economic systems, and cultures and languages. This is going to be a learning curve. But if China were to help push behind this wheel instead of standing in front of it, I think it could be much better. In the end, are the goals of the Belt and Road Initiative laudable? Will they lead to better things? This is one question India has to answer for itself.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition and discussion. We're completely running out of time, but of course, a host of issues and aspects still lying on the table unaddressed. What really lies on the road ahead? What is India planning to do? And what, according to the world, is the perception of India's move? We will touch upon those aspects as well. But with that, I'm having to thank all our panelists, Mr. Jacob, Mr. Tanyan, and Mr. Ranade, for joining us for this discussion. With